everyone, it's Caroline. I know what you're thinking, maybe. Caroline, a favorites of 2021 video smack dab in the middle of February 2022. What the heck are you thinking? And to that, I really have no answer for you. I was gonna do this video, and then I wasn't gonna do this video, and then I was, and then I wasn't. I had a very will they, won't they situationship with me actually carrying out this video, but I've ultimately decided that I'm just gonna sit down and film it, and then worst case scenario, I hate it, and I never edit it, and I never post it, and you all will be none the wiser. I'm gonna be talking about my top 6 favorite reads of 2021, and if you're thinking like, how did you get to that number 6? Well, I'll tell you, I read about 60 books in the year of 2021, so if I give you my top 6, that's like my top 10%, and that's just too good of a percentage to pass up. I am going to be ranking these, so I'll start out with my 6th favorite book of the year, and then I'll work my way up to my top 1 favorite book of the year, and I think that I've had quite enough dilly-dallying, and I'm just gonna get to the book. Coming in at number 6 is a book that when I was writing it down on this list, I was kind of like, does this make sense? Like, was this a favorite of the year? But ultimately, I read it almost a year ago now, and I'm still thinking about it a lot, and that to me is like a surefire sign that like, yes, you did enjoy this. This was a favorite of the year. It's a book that blends and bends genres so well, which I'm coming to discover I think is really important to me and like will really signify a favorite of mine, which The Night Tiger by Youngzi Chu did flawlessly. The book is set in like an early 1900s Malaysia, so there's a little bit of historical fiction going on there, but then there's also this mystery kind of going on in the background. So we have that. There's also people trying to piece together different puzzles of the mystery. So that puts them in kind of some thriller, high-speed chase scenes as well. There's a little bit of forbidden romance. And then ultimately, why I think what really sealed the deal for me in terms of it being a favorite was this kind of folkloric magic that's going on as well, which I think just made the tone so ethereal and atmospheric. Because of all of the blends of the different genres, it's really kind of hard for me to know how to synopsize this book, but we're focusing on 2 primary characters' lives are kind of winding closer and closer together because of this severed finger. One of the main characters is a servant boy who is trying to re-obtain this missing finger so that way his master can be buried with it and kind of move on and pass on to the other side. And then the other main character is a young woman who ends up through a series of different events coming in possession of this finger, so obviously their lives are going to wind closer and closer because of that. But then there's also just a bunch more kind of things going on. There's this mystery of all these bodies keep appearing, and no one can really seem to figure out if it is a tiger attack or if it is murders going on by a man, or if it could possibly be a were-tiger, a tiger that turns into a man and then is killing these people. There's some kind of familial drama going on in the life of this young woman. And with the young boy, there's these beautiful talks of like grief and mourning and passing in and out of this ghost world. And ultimately, I just found the whole thing beautiful and enthralling and slow and atmospheric, and it just kind of checked all of my boxes. Very much look forward to reading more of Youngzi Chu in the future. Coming in at number 5 is a middle grade, and I'm going to tell you right here and now, this is not the last middle grade that you are going to see on this favorites list. 2021 really was the year of the middle grade for me, and with this one we have The Shape of Thunder by Jasmine Warga. I am so happy that Jasmine Warga is writing middle grade. I think that she really found her niche in that age range. Her other middle grade, Other Words for Home, was one of my favorite books of 2020, so I think that this one being on my favorites of 2021 like officially seals the deal of her being one of my all-time favorite authors. This is truly a story about friendship and healing and heartbreak and what it means to come together after trauma. At the beginning of this story, we learn that our 2 main characters, Cora and Quinn, have had their friendship kind of torn apart in the wake of this school shooting where they both lost family members, and then they have been trying to cope and deal with their grief. Quinn ultimately wants to rectify this, and she wants Cora to be her best friend again, so she proposes to Cora that they look for a wormhole in the woods behind their house in order to go back in time and then stop this school shooting from ever happening. That way they'd have their family members back and they wouldn't have gone through this trauma that they are now in the middle of dealing with. I've said it once, I've said it a million times, middle grade never fails to take take these larger than life concepts and put them into these beautiful stories that are accessible for young people, but then at the same time so necessary for older readers like me as well. I think that with this, Jasmine Warga managed to show off her beautiful and stunning way of writing. The parallels that she pulls between time travel and grief is just done in a way that only she can pull off. Also, at the same time, she remains very rooted in reality, and her depictions of family, I think, are very timely and real. Jasmine Warga takes extra care to show that grief is a messy process and adults are not absolved from making mistakes in this story, which I think ultimately is something that young people need to read, but it's also something that I needed to read as well. I know that this may sound a little bit dramatic, but I do truly believe that this is a story that has the potential to save and change lives. Like, if it gets put in the right person's hand at the right time, it has that much depth and that much power behind its message that it could truly be capable of saving someone's life. Next up, we have a book that makes me so happy that I did not go through with my original plan of just stopping my reading in December. I was having just such a frustrating reading year in 2021 that I was potentially going to just stop reading throughout all of the month of December and then start back up again in January, but I didn't, and I'm so glad because in the final dregs of January, I picked up Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and my life has not been the same since. This one is focusing on our main character, who is a middle school science teacher turned astronaut, and he wakes up alone on this space station, and on this space station, we slowly get to learn along with him as we watch him regain his memories of how he ended up on this spaceship out in the middle of space in the first place. And we ultimately find out that he is on a mission to try and save humanity and Earth because the sun is dying. It's a little bit isolated space station survival, but then also we get interspliced those memories flashing back to his life on Earth. And I cannot tell you how many times that I've heard about Andy Weir, that he makes science-y things so accessible and that he has such a humorous way of writing and that his characters are so dynamic. And let me tell you that I got all of those things confirmed 5,000% when I read Project Hail Mary. It is a book about space, and it is a book about science, and it is a book about survival, but ultimately for me, it was a book about friendship and what it means to be a friend and put others before yourself, like when it comes to humanity, but then also when it comes to friends. I loved it so much. I loved the characters. I loved that it made me feel smart because I actually was able to keep up with all of the science stuff that was going on, or at least Andy Weir made me feel like I was keeping up with all of the sciencey stuff that was going on. It was immersive. It was high stakes. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me question every single reading preference I ever thought I had when I thought that I wasn't capable of loving a sci-fi book that did that, but now I want to pick more up. So thank you, Andy Weir, for Project Hail Mary. Next up is another book that kind of made me question every single reading preference I ever thought I had. Me and the YA fantasy genre are either best friends or enemies, but with this one, we were more than best friends. I mean, we were in a committed relationship. The book that I am talking about with this is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faizal. This is an Arabian-inspired desert setting, quest-based fantasy. And the way that Hafsa Faizal sets up this story is something that I'm learning more and more, I think is something that makes me love YA fantasy, and it's where we have two characters. One of our main characters is a girl that is trying to save her village that is kind of dying out, and then the other character is this dark prince that is sent on this quest by his very abusive father, who is the ruler of the land. We have these two characters. They end up on a quest for the same sort of magical artifact, so it's kind of a race to see who can get there first. And initially, they don't know that each other exists, and they don't know that the other one is hunting that artifact, but then eventually they learn about the other one hunting the artifact. So then it's like a high-speed chase, but then it's also like, I want to kill you before you get to this thing that I need. And the tension that Hafsa Faizal is able to weave into this story is unparalleled, unmatched. I loved every single character in this one so deeply. About halfway through, we get a little bit of found family, and it's a found family that is so near and dear to my heart. What really and truly sold this one for me was the characters, but I do not think that Hafsa Faizal gets her due when it comes to her writing style. It was so enticing in a way that I was flipping pages, and I don't read a lot of fantasy, and usually when I do, it's something that I kind of have to push my way through. Not with this one, my friends. I could not put this one down, and the only times that I did put it down was when I would throw it across the room because something so shocking would happen, or a character said something to another character that just made me like want to burst into tears and scream and laugh and cry all at once. It really and truly does not receive enough hype. I really and truly believe that. If you have not yet picked up We Hunt the Flame, I need you to, and then I need you to tell me about that, because then maybe it will motivate me to finally pick up the second in the duology. I've been so scared just because the ending of We Hunt the Flame emotionally eviscerated me, but I've put it off for long enough and I'm ready to be hurt again. We're down to our top 2 people, and coming in at number 2 is a book where this may be the only case where a film/TV adaptation is what made me pick up the book and not vice versa. I started watching the Netflix TV series Anne with an E early on in 2021, and ultimately it's one of the best decisions I ever made. One, because the TV show is so brilliant, but also it actually got me to pick up the beloved childhood classic Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery, and it caused me to quite literally, both the TV show and the book, lose my ever-loving mind. In Anne of Green Gables, we are following our main character, Anne, who is the most vivacious and witty and wonderful main character that I have ever had the pleasure of reading from. She's a young orphan girl who ends up going to stay with these 2 siblings who initially thought when they were adopting an orphan was going to be a boy who was going to help with the work on their farm, but ultimately they got stuck with Anne, and Anne slowly works her way into their hearts as well as into the hearts of everyone else in Green Gables. It's very much just following the day-to-day life of Anne. We actually see her get to grow up a pretty good chunk. Like, we follow her from early childhood all the way into her adulthood just in this one book. But the way that Anne talks and just her passion and enthusiasm for literally every single person and cause and event that she comes into contact with just did something for my inner child, I think. I think that Anne is who I wish that I could have been when I was younger. This book actually is a case where I'm actually really glad that I read this in my adulthood and not in my childhood, because I think that I would have been a little bit too jealous of Anne, or a little bit too similar to Anne when I was younger, whereas now I get to kind of see it from a distance, from afar, and I loved every single second of it. The friendship between Diana and Anne is one that is so near and dear to my heart. The relationship that Anne had with Matthew and Marilla is so near and dear to my heart. I loved the writing of L.M. Montgomery, the way that she describes seasons and just Green Gables itself. I was sitting on a beach when I was reading this book, but like, I was not on the beach when I was reading. I was in Green Gables. I was at the starlit pond. I was walking through all of these frostbitten forests, and I loved every single second of it. And finally, in my number 1 spot, we have probably the only book that I read in 2021 that will make it into like my all-time life favorites list, and that is Everything Sad is Untrue by Daniel Nayeri. Try as I might with this one, and believe me, I have tried very hard. I cannot find a way to synopsize it in a way that truly encapsulates what is so brilliant about this book. It's part memoir of Daniel Nayeri's life as a young child, as he grows up in Iran and then ends up having to flee, and then his life as a refugee making his way to the US and ultimately to Oklahoma. So that's one part of it, but then Daniel Nayeri intersplices and interweaves all of these Persian folkloric myths that come from his ancestors that have been passed down, and he draws parallels from what is going on in his childhood to these folkloric tales, and I'm not doing a good job at it. I just need you to read it. When they talk about life's works, like writers writing what is a life's work, this is what comes to mind. It is written from the perspective of a middle grade child, but I will not hear one single second of middle grade slander about how middle grade has no depth, or that, you know, you can't ever really get into the voice of middle grade characters. That will not happen to you with this one. There is writing and storytelling in this one that brought me to my knees, knocked the wind out of me when I was reading it. It's a portrait of the life of a young refugee, and at the same time is a love letter to his mother, and at the same time is a tapestry of Persian tales. And it's one that just sticks with me. Like, I am going to live with this story in my mind and in my heart and in my soul for the rest of my life. Alrighty everyone, that brings me to the end of my top books of 2021. I hope that you had a marvelous time watching this. I hope that maybe some new books got put onto your radar, or maybe you got your feelings affirmed if you read and loved these books as well. 2021 was, albeit not that great of a reading year for me, but if anything, I think that makes these books stand out even more, because in a reading year that was so just mundane and blah, these books were vivacious and brilliant and wonderful, and I'm so grateful to these authors, and I'm so grateful to these characters, and I'm so grateful to these stories. Here is to another year of reading and another year of sharing what I'm reading with you all in 2022. And I hope that wherever you are having a fantastic day, and I will see you again very, very soon. Goodbye!